And welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Plek, and joining me within the studio is none other than Machine Gun Nick. Some people are calling him Shotgun Nick. It's kind of like a weird thing that's happened recently. So tell me about the advancements or maybe regression in your, firearms capabilities.
Somebody just forgot Machine Gun Nick and went with Shotgun Nick, and then somebody else, Rob, definitely was like, oh, Shotgun Nick. And so now this is.
So now you're just a breaching tool.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm not. I'm Machine Gun Nick.
All right, thanks. All right, and also in studios, none other than Pastor Muhammad Ali. Pastor Mo, glad you're here. You've just preached an awesome sermon on the exclusivity of Christianity. Is Christianity too narrow? How you feeling this morning?
Feeling great.
Afternoon.
Yeah.
All right. So here's kind of where we went with the sermon. We went through Matthew 7, essentially, and we looked at really narrow is the road that leads to life and wide is the road that leads to destruction. And talk to us about kind of where you went with that and how you address the question, is Christianity too narrow?
Yeah, so I think with that word narrow, my mind immediately went to that passage of the narrow road. So just go there, and then then you kind of have to define, what does Jesus mean by narrow? How narrow is it? So then you kind of got to take him at his word from another scripture. I went to John, I'm the way, the truth, the life. And then I kind of wanted to look at the objections for the exclusivity of Christianity, because that's usually where that question even formulates from. Like, is Christianity too narrow? And it's usually, what about people who are sincere? What about all the other religions? This is claiming to be one out of the thousands. That's correct. That's pretty, like the guy that I quoted, like spiritually narcissistic. And the last one, what I actually think is a genuinely good question. What about those who haven't heard? So I kind of put that into the passage and then started talking about false converts and false prophets, because right after he says, here's the road, it's narrow, then he starts talking about that. Yeah. So in light of those objections and the text, and then ending it on building on solid ground.
Yeah, let's talk through some of it. So you actually quoted this. Matthew 7:1 says, don't judge lest you be judged. Mm-hmm. And usually that's where people go like, whoa. Shouldn't we stop judging people and, calling out untruth? Mm-hmm. And you quoted Joel Osteen, you quoted the church down the street that's PC USA, extreme liberal church. Mm-hmm. Tell me about why you felt that you need to address that in terms of don't judge, but you actually, and how do you, when people say that, what do you tell them?
Yeah, I think I wanted to address that because for those who are outside of the church who are saying, hey, why does Jesus get to be the only one? That's to be expected, because you're not a follower of Jesus, and scripturally, theologically, you are dead in your sin. You want to suppress the truth. You want to do everything that you possibly can so that your conscience isn't being toggled. Right. Yeah. So it makes sense that you'd want to oppose it. But to me, the second that you say, hey, I am a follower of Jesus, and then you say that Jesus isn't the only way, well, now we got some problems.
And I think that's what Jesus is doing here.
Yeah.
I feel because I think what happens, I think one of the things you said was great. Hey, if you want to use the verse, don't judge lest you be judged, your response to that was keep reading.
Just keep going.
And because when you get to verse 13, it says, narrow is the road. It means you have to judge between roads.
Yes.
You have to make a decision between roads. And then it says, he talks about, here's what a false prophet or false teacher looks like. Yep. You have to judge what that is by their fruit. Yep. And then here's what a false convert looks like. You have to judge that by their fruit. Yep. And so you are judging. So and this is many times where Jesus he says two things that seem to be opposed to each other, but they sort of form I don't know, call it you don't go off. He's not an extreme either way. So he says, on one hand, come to me, all you are weary, heavy laden, I will give you rest. That's very comforting. I love that. But he also says, if you would come after me, you must take up your cross, die to yourself, and follow me. Yep. And so those seem like to be juxtaposed together, almost oxymoronic, but they're not. It's just two sides of the same coin, maybe. And so I think that's what you're saying here is don't judge non-Christians. God does that. You just tell them the truth. But as a Christian, you have an imperative to proclaim truth.
Yeah, you gotta, and even just like finishing that verse that I didn't get to in 1 Corinthians 5:12-13. At the end of 13, it says, God will judge outsiders. It's our job to judge inside of the church. And it says, it says, purge the evil person from among you.
Yeah.
And then it quoted that. And I was like, where the heck did that quote from? And it's Deuteronomy, 4 different places where it says that in the book of Deuteronomy.
Right.
So there's really this intense focus on keeping the bride pure.
Right.
Which makes sense because you're the bride of Christ and you're supposed to represent him. And when you misrepresent him, what ends up happening is people look at you, false convert, and they think that that's what God is like. And then now that false convert is prohibiting people who want to come to know Jesus because those people think that that's what followers of Jesus do.
Right.
So there's a lot of repercussions.
So how do
so
we
it makes sense.
handle that false prophet? Because we're talking like the truth. We hold believers to the truth, to the standard.
Yeah.
Non-believers, we just tell them the truth and we don't judge them because that's for God.
Yep.
But then when you have like a false prophet or someone who's spewing out these narratives that are false, do we handle them like a believer or do we handle them like not a believer?
Yeah, not a believer. We don't have the same standard.
Mm-hmm.
Because the cool thing with a Christian is you're now saying, hey, we're on the same team.
Right.
Right? Like, and the cool thing with people being on your same team, like when you play basketball, football, or whatever, I'm sure for you guys in the Army, like there's different standards.
Right.
And you can say something to your brother that you would never say to somebody else because you know you all have the same goal.
Yeah, right. It's like, hey, if somebody gets fat in the Army, you're like, bro, lose weight. If somebody is like gains weight outside of the military, you're like, what's my, other than like you're being bad for your health, that's a personal thing. But there's a standard in the Army that we got to go serve together, fight together. I need you to be physically fit for my own sake.
That's right.
So that we can go fight the war. So I think that's kind of how it is with Christianity. It's like if you're inside the body, I need you doctrinally, spiritually strong because there's a battle to fight, and we don't want to be spiritual weaklings or like have no soul, especially when we're trying to, especially now. And I say now, not like, again, I think we made this comment several times. It's not like the world is any worse than it was 100 years ago, 50 years ago. It's the same badness. It's just our culture specifically in this of America is we're in a negative space of Christianity where to talk about Christ in the public square puts you in a negative light. And so I'm not saying we're not trying to punch and have a fight, but the reality is we need to stand strong and stand firm in what we believe and communicate, or else we're not being faithful to the watch that God's given us. And again, I think what that sometimes does is puts us in a light of like what we're against as opposed to what we're for. And I get that it's way more fun to talk about what we're for than what we're against. But I think part of being what you're for also means you're against something. It's like
100%.
every yes you say, you're saying no to something else.
Right.
So let's go into some objections here. One of the things we said, everyone wants to go to heaven. Everybody wants to kind of be a part of the in crowd, but people don't want to change. Why is that? And why is change required for the gospel?
Because there's no such thing as an unchanged Christian, because if the power of God, if God is all powerful, you expect that he can change the worst of the worst, or those who on the outside look like they were just fine, but he changes their hearts. Mm-hmm. So if you're saying I don't need to change and I can still enter into heaven, it's very problematic in a lot of ways. But I think from a personal perspective, as you're saying God doesn't have the power to change me, 1, 2, you're expecting a holy God to be in the presence of you, unchanged, sinful man. So that's very problematic. And then 3, then your universality, everybody that has ever lived is going to get to heaven. You're saying that, like, why stop at humanity? What about Satan and his angels?
Right. Why aren't they in heaven?
Because the second you say God should let everybody into heaven, you can't just limit it to humanity.
Right.
That's not true universality.
Right.
So your argument, universalist, is that Satan should be in heaven with God. Good luck with that one.
Right.
Right. So you have to explain that one to me.
Okay, now that's good. That has never crossed my mind. I think when we started this Explore God series with suffering, and I talked about the cosmic battle in heaven of God and Satan kind of going at it, and it was the product of that conversation in heaven, which then caused the suffering of Job.
Yep.
But ultimately, for God's glory and Job's good. But when you don't see that, it's hard to comprehend it apart from the picture we were given post the experience that Job had.
Yeah.
Talk to me then also about genuine faith, people that are sincere.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we advocating that people who are sincere are not going to be experiencing heaven if they're genuinely seeking? Mm-hmm. What do you think the response is for that?
Yeah, so I think that because it's the same thing with false prophets. So I would say there's false prophets who are genuinely seeking, and they are they're being lied to by Satan, and he has them in their grip, but they believe they're doing a good thing. And there are those who know that they're doing a wrong thing, and they continue to do it anyways. Right. So I think so genuineness does not necessitate truth. Nice. Because you could be a genuine, like I said, like serial killer. Right. Something could be wrong in your brain, and you genuinely enjoy murdering other people. Yeah. That doesn't mean that what you're doing is right. Right. So we would look at that and be like, dang, that freaking sick person. Right. We are just as sick with sin. So we can be genuinely seeking other idols, and we have sincerity about it. Like there are, like Zach was telling about the like Buddhists in Thailand, and they like the self-flagellation that they have. They sincerely do that. Yeah. But they're worshiping idols. It's literally like demonic. Right. So you can be a genuine person who has been lied to by the enemy, and that's why the gospel is, to me, the most supernatural miracle is now you're opening their eyes to what it was that they genuinely sought after. And they're like, man. So that's why it's like, apart from the power of God, even if it's genuine, it's obviously still not correct. Okay, so here's one of the things that this came up last night, Machine Gun Nick. Maybe you can kind of speak into it, because we were talking about these verses and really kind of getting into genuineness. And we said there's faith without works is dead, and we pointed James for that. But I think this passage of Matthew 7 is works without faith is dead. Yeah. Because what we keep looking at is, didn't I cast out demons in your name? And didn't I do all these great things? And he's to say, oh, depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. So, but they had the deeds, because they're pointing back to something they did. Yep. But they didn't have the genuine faith. And then in James, you have someone he's saying, like, don't tell me about your faith, and then your life has not been transformed at all. Yep. You've got to it's not faith without works is dead, and works without faith is dead. And so it's two sides of the same coin. Faith and works go together. Yeah. So I think there's that part of that really struck me. I think it was you brought it up. So what prompted that from you?
That was Joe that brought that up.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was Joe brought that up.
Right, because I brought up about the bad fruit and the good fruit trees. But looking at that, like just looking, because I'm a 2-year convert to the church, right? And if you'd have told me at the time of my baptism, which I think y'all did, was wait till the changes start, and I was like, yeah, right. And then but you seriously start going through those changes. Like, I mean, right now, I can no longer smoke a cigarette, and I used to smoke a pack a day. And those are small. Like getting through this conversation without dropping F-bombs. I mean, like all the things start lining up. The more you start looking at God and asking for His grace and His blessings, and then that feeling that you are actually loved by this higher power who has unconditional love for you, and those change, like you can't stop that train of changes. Yeah, that's gonna happen, and I don't think some people are even prepared for that. And the first time they hit like a speed bump, because you're gonna go through those pains, those heart hurts that you've kept inside you for years, and it's gonna get hard and it's gonna get dark. And you can run away from it, or you just run towards it. And I think that's really what people need to experience, and as they complete that relationship with God and move in closer to it. And it goes hand in hand. Like, you're not going to be the person that sees somebody stuck on the side of the road and be like, oh, I'll just drive past them and still be a person of God. You're going to feel a certain way. You're going to feel convicted that maybe I let my guard down for 1 second and see if this person needs help.
Okay, so I'm going to shift to a couple public things that have happened recently. One is Kuwait's crown prince recently became a Christian, and it's been blowing up my social media. And he's saying Jesus is the only way, coming from a obviously Muslim background. And I think it's sort of wild to kind of to look at this, because he says, first of all, I fully agree with the distribution of this audio file where he says, I will be a Christian. And I now declare, if they kill me because of it, I will appear before Jesus Christ and be with him for all eternity. And so it's wild to sort of see that sort of radical, supernatural experience. And he's now speaking out as a Christian. I think across the Middle East, you're seeing conversions happening through dreams, happening through all these like radical ways as people genuinely seeking.
Yes.
And God genuinely revealing.
Yes.
And so I think this is where getting back to the genuine question. If you are genuinely seeking, you will find him.
Yes.
And I think I don't want to put any disclaimers on that, but I think
you
that's
would hope
true.
So.
Yeah.
I don't know that I could say universally God has showed himself to every single person that has sought him. I am hopeful that he has and that he will. Then the question becomes, is it unjust for God to condemn someone who, quote unquote, never got an opportunity to hear the gospel, to see a vision, to see a dream? And I'd say no, because it is equally unjust for God to send down his son and for any to get an opportunity at salvation, as it is for God to condemn sinful man to hell because we're sinful man. So both are, to me, mysterious. But as opposed to questioning God, why would that person in Papua New Guinea who never heard the gospel go to hell? I'm going to say, you're gracious to allow even any sinners to enter into your presence. And I'm going to hope on the goodness of God, that he will reveal himself to those who truly seek him.
So, and here's one of the things that I think, if you don't know Pastor Mo's story, Pastor Mo may have come off like, oh, arrogant or whatever, because I think I heard some groans, like audio, and I was like, oh man, these people are fired up. But knowing your story, you're not coming off as like better than anybody. What you're coming off as is a person who's experienced the goodness of God. And this has been like, you becoming a Christian cost you. Can you talk to that, just speak to that a little bit of like what Christianity cost you? I'm not saying it might be quite as extreme as the Crown Prince of Kuwait, but sort of.
Much lower stakes. No, man, it's family more than anything. I mean, there was money. Dad's rich. They came. My grandfather was actually from Palestine, and got the heck out of the Gaza Strip, because anybody over there who's not a Muslim extremist wants to get the heck out. So they got out, built for themselves a really nice business in Jordan, because there's oil over there. there's opportunities if you put in the work. And they just had money, man. They had a lot of real estate. And like, it's supposed to get handed down into your family. So there was money, but the biggest thing that I lost was the relationship, for sure. Like telling my dad, hey, I'm not Muslim, like I'm Christian. And then telling him and sharing the gospel with him, it wasn't honestly that hard. He was pretty chill. Like, he didn't hate me for it. He didn't whatever. He was cool. But yeah, I would say relationship.
Because it's not like thing. You're not as close. And
no, we don't talk.
Not talk at all.
No,
do you text ever?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So that's the hardest thing, but it's cool because I love how Paul describes the Christian life. He says, sorrowful yet always rejoicing. So I feel like you get hit with both at the same time, like right after that, and through whatever you go through, like, man, that sucked, but I know that Jesus is right here, and he has gone through this thing more than I ever have, and you get to co-suffer with Jesus. It's a weird thing, like finding joy in your suffering.
All right, so Man, I really appreciate you sharing that. It does make the message that much more powerful when it's like, this isn't something you're just preaching from everybody I know loves Jesus and that's just the way it is. This is something you're preaching from this is a internal family struggle that has cost me, and I'm choosing it because of the goodness of God.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I got another question from our audience, and it was this. First off, thank you for a great sermon this past Sunday on the exclusivity of Christianity. In your sermon, you quoted Alistair Begg. It was a relevant quote and aligned with truth. But because you quoted Alistair Begg, I was wondering if you could weigh in on the recent controversy surrounding his recommendation to her grandmother to attend the wedding of her grandchild marrying someone identifying as transgender. Do you agree with Alistair Begg's advice? And how should we handle weddings and other events involving sinful practices? And if Alistair Begg is in error, or any other pastor speaks in error, how should we handle the rest of their ministry?
Yeah, so what Alistair Begg did in his criticism, I agree in the sense that he asked people to be consistent, because his basic thing was like, hey, if you're saying you're not going to go to a gay marriage, well, would you go to a marriage where someone who is Christian is marrying a non-Christian? That's a sin. Mm-hmm. So would you go to that?
No.
And I appreciate that he's asking for that consistency.
Right.
Now, his solution to what he's urging people to do, I think, is completely erroneous, because my standard for attending a wedding is the same for officiating a wedding. So I will not officiate or attend a Christian who's marrying a non-Christian.
Right.
I will not attend a homosexual union because it's not a union.
Right.
I will attend and officiate two people who know that they're not Christians and they're not looking to be Christians.
Right.
And I will officiate and attend two people who are Christians and I can vouch for, they're followers of Jesus.
Yeah.
So I think he's just asking for consistency, but I think that his solution
was not right.
is problematic.
Is that standard on an unequally yoked marriage? Is that across the board, or is that just yours? How do you justify these two people? One's a Christian, one's not a Christian, and you're like, no.
Yeah, because the Bible says don't be unequally yoked, and he's specifically meaning a business partnership, but that definitely relates to marriage. That's a huge
business.
Yeah, that's
relationship.
You Inc. Right?
Yeah.
So I would say that that's a huge deal. That's why I would never get into business with and by that doesn't mean you can't go work for a non-believer, because clearly you wouldn't have a job. But what it does mean is you can't hey, we're 50-50 stakeholders in this business or whatever. So you don't do that, right? So
I learned that the hard way.
Yeah. So and that's important, because they don't have the same ethics and they don't have the same viewpoint, because in a marriage you're going the same direction. We want everything we're doing to glorify God. In a business, you want everything you're doing to glorify God.
Yeah.
Glorify God. But what that doesn't mean is when people who are non-believers come and ask you to marry them, both of them are non-believers.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing a civil duty that is actually forwarding Christian culture, which is a good thing.
It's common grace.
That's a common grace. Marriage is a gift of God to all people.
Yep.
And when they are kind of going I am committing to one person for the rest of my life, that we want to celebrate that as two non-Christians that are sort of showing the world God's common grace to humanity. However, when it's one Christian marrying a non-Christian, this is what does Jesus have with Belial or Satan? What does Jesus have with Satan? You don't want to marry those two together.
Yep.
And so they are not representing anything of God. And so you don't want to support that marriage from the standpoint of
attending.
Yep. Now, after they're married, you're like, well, you're in. So I'm going to be 100% behind you.
Yeah, you sinned, but now for you to no longer be together would be to further sin.
Right. And so now I'm
to marry a non-Christian. Yeah.
So now I'm doing marriage counseling or coaching to help you stay married.
Yes.
Right.
Because that's the least amount of damage.
Don't go get divorced. I'm not showing up the wedding, but I'm there next day for marriage coaching.
Yep. 100%.
Here we go.
And you can't do that with a homosexual wedding.
Right.
Because after the wedding day, they are still living in sin.
Right.
And the most righteous thing to do would be for them to separate.
Right.
So that's why it's different.
Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. But it also, on the flip side, why would a non-believer want a marriage in?
Because they're hot.
No, I know why they would. What I'm saying in the church, if I'm a non-believer, it's not going to matter. I've gone and done Justice of the Peace once. I did. The first ex-wife.
Yeah.
So I'm just speaking the truth.
Yeah. So what's your question then?
So my question is why would a non-believer want a marriage in the church if they're not going to believe at all?
Why would they want that?
Yeah.
Because they think that's I'm being sensitive, or I'm being appreciative of
Yep.
my spouse's or future spouse's
Right.
religion, and I'm not
Okay.
against their religion. I want to support their religion, so we'll get married in a church, and
Yep.
we'll have a pastor do the wedding, and that's where it gets it's like a concession that they're making.
Oh, so they feel like it's a compromise.
Yeah, hey, listen, I'm not a Christian. I don't want to believe any of that stuff you believe, but we'll get married in a church.
Yep.
Shoot, I'll even raise our kids in the church with you because I love you that much.
Yep.
But what you're doing when you're the Christian spouse involved there, you've compromised
Yep.
your faith, and you've now brought in darkness to light, and you don't want to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that person wouldn't come to faith. In fact, the Bible is very clear. Like, if you're married to a non-believer, stay married.
Stay married.
Because who knows? You
Yep.
might convert them, but don't start off that way.
Yep.
That's the wrong way to go. So how about this? How should we handle weddings and other events involving sinful practices? I think we would say be consistent. I like Alistair
consistent.
Begg, be consistent,
Yeah.
but I would say to Alistair Begg, I kind of disagree with what you view of consistency, because I wouldn't go to the wedding of a believer and the non-believer, because I can't support that.
Yep.
But then here's the final question that this person brings up: how should we handle the rest of their ministry? And I guess what they're meaning is, like, because they're in maybe I disagree with Alistair Begg here. Does that mean we throw out the rest of his ministry, or do we go like, listen, there are parts of someone's ministry we can disagree with, but overall the primary fruit of the ministry is pretty great. Like, Alistair Begg is like 20, 30 plus years of great, fruitful, God honoring ministry, and we can disagree on certain points. But what do you think about that?
Man, that's tough. Yeah. Oh, that's really hard, because that speaks to, man, that's hard. I don't know. Wait and see.
Yeah.
I'd still listen to him, but after that, I would be a lot more cautious.
Right.
I'll be a lot more cautious. And I'd do the same thing as when that was brought up.
Right.
I heard that and I was like, I don't care that it's Alistair Begg. I disagree.
Right.
So I think just do that with everything that you hear.
Yeah.
Test the spirits.
Test the spirit. Yeah, test the spirit, see of God. And,
Yeah.
and I think that does that mean Alistair Begg's not a Christian? I just think no, but I think that's a part of, did he compromise is this a place of compromise that he's gotten to, or is this a place of conviction?
Right.
How can the same Holy Spirit take him to make a statement like that and encourage the grandmother to go to the same sex or transgender marriage or whatever? How can that same spirit live in him and then live in me, and we come up with different conclusions? Sometimes I feel that way about voting. How can the same person with the same Holy Spirit vote differently and that still be of God?
Yeah.
But clearly there is some of that, and I don't fully wrap my head around that, and there's probably freedom in certain aspects, but on this one I disagree ultimately with the direction he went with that.
Yep.
And what I don't want to do is completely throw out all of Alistair Begg, because he's preached a lot of gospel truth and he's got a cool accent, so therefore
But then you also quoted Joel Osteen, correct?
Yeah.
And then, so, I mean, me being me, sometimes everything's black and everything's white. There's no gray. I want to be like, so Joel Osteen's kind of like Joseph Smith. Either one's not really is a false prophet if we're not going by the word of God and we're not standing up to that in front of the masses. Like Joel Osteen was so afraid that he'd lose, members, that he couldn't be like, right, if you're not a Christian, you're not going to heaven.
yeah, I don't know if he was afraid of losing members, and maybe that is it. But why not just, if you've got, I think he's a great communicator, but why not, in your greatness of community, just preach the truth?
Yeah.
I've always said that, like, why not? Why not preach the truth and let God work it out? And you can do it in incredibly winsome, whatever way, but just communicate God's truth. And I think in this day and age that it's going to backfire at some point. Because, and I don't want to say backfire, because I don't know what his goal is. And maybe he just wants to be, I just want to be a step towards real Christianity. I don't know. That seems like a weird step, but he could be like, I just want to be like a halfway Christian. But I want to really make you feel good and feel, I'm going to only talk about, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And I'm going to leave out follow me, take up your cross, die to yourself. I think that's what Joel Osteen is. Joel Osteen only preaches that come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. That builds a big church. The part that says, hey, come, if you're going to follow me, you better take up your cross, die daily, follow me. And I think there's churches that only preach that. And I think you're missing out on the whole counsel of God, which is sort of both, which is what I think with our role as I don't want to say the true church because I don't want to go down that road. But I think when you're completely sharing the gospel, you're going to preach on both sides. And if you neglect one for the other, I think you're missing out on the heart of Christianity.
I also think you're missing out on an untapped resource of men out there that when you go up there and you only preach one side or the other, well, where's the truth? And there's men out there that, cut the BS. Right. Give me the full truth, be bold.
Punch me in the face, I love it.
Yeah, punch me in the face with it. Oh, crap, this isn't, all right, I can respect this pastor, so I can start going to him because I do see a trend, or I do see stuff on social media where they're like, well, we get into a church and the pastor's kind of, not as manly as we'd like. We got no respect for him. We walk out. Right. And there's a great group of guys out there that I think I like that.
Yeah. So what I loved about this past Sunday is that a guy, non-Christian, came up to me after the sermon, and I was expecting it to be like, this is why I don't go to church. You guys are so exclusive, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, this is the best sermon series I have ever heard because these are the questions I've been asking, and I feel like somebody is finally answering them with a solid perspective.
And what's crazy about him is he grew up in church.
Yeah.
Going to church camp his whole life.
Yeah, and left the church because I don't want to, this has nothing for, it's not answering any of the questions I really have.
He was ill-equipped.
And so then all of a sudden when the questions come, people are like, well, I guess you're right. There's no point.
That's right.
And then another lady wrote in, it's like, I've been coming to your church for a couple of weeks. Thank you for preaching God's word. And I was like, wow, that was two unsolicited responses. Now I'm sure there might be a whole list of people who didn't send any unsolicited responses. This isn't like I'm advocating, give me more feedback that's negative, but sure, give it, bring it. But I do think that there's reality that I feel like people love truth, even if it's a little bit abrasive, because it causes you to get a little bit uncomfortable with the reality of what you're dealing with and kind of double down on what truth is.
Yes.
All right. Any other thoughts?
I really want to, your comments about the youth, you
mean young people?
Yeah, the young people, the services and stuff provided, and how we're missing as a Christian community, getting the youth ready for those hard years when they turn 20, they go off to college, and they're not in this little bubble anymore. Now they get asked with the real facts that a lot of church communities don't instill in them. And I mean, that's a struggle that's real. And if we want to bring our youth up properly, we're going to have to get over that hurdle and get them ready for that, because that's going to be the fight. And we could lose, we already are losing many to that. And it's, it's great that it was brought up. And it's just something we're going to have to work on as a community, as a whole, I think.
Amen.
Any other thoughts, Pastor Mo?
No, man, love it. It was a privilege to do it. I love that this was your vision for the series, especially after Easter, and maybe some people that haven't come to church in a while, and you're just going straight for the most important questions that everybody's asking. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Hey, we have one more this week. We're talking about what is the purpose of life, and so come on Sunday, and we'll see you there. I would love for you to keep engaging as we explore God. Listen, hey, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, text us at 737-231-0605 or go to pastorplek.com. We'd love to hear from you. Address your questions right here on this podcast. From our house to yours, have an awesome week of worship.